Lena Dunham isn't trying to be the voice of a generation anymore, and that's perfectly fine. She's accepted it. In a world where expectations weighed heavily on her shoulders, Dunham now speaks with clarity about the limitations of her most famous work. Her series, Girls, which aired on HBO throughout the 2010s, was both praised and critiqued as a defining show of its era. But in a new interview with The Independent on July 5, Dunham reflected on what the show did, and didn't, achieve. She explained that the problem wasn't necessarily the stories told in Girls, but the broader context in which they aired. There was so little real estate for women in television, Dunham said. And with a title like Girls, audiences expected something bigger than Four Friends in New York. They thought it was describing all the girls, in all the places, she continued. But it wasn't. It was never meant to be that universal. The show focused on one specific group of 20-something women navigating adulthood in New York City. Those characters, Hannah, Marnie, Jessa, and Shoshana, were messy, flawed, and often unlikable. They struggled with work. They stumbled through complicated relationships. They questioned their friendships. And that honesty, while refreshing for some, felt exclusionary to others. Dunham now recognizes that disappointment. She understands why some viewers didn't see themselves reflected in the world of Girls. For a show called Girls, the lack of diversity and broader perspective felt limiting. And she doesn't run from that criticism anymore. Instead, she embraces it as part of the conversation. The cultural landscape was different when Girls debuted. There were fewer shows centering young women's experiences. There were even fewer that portrayed those women as selfish, insecure, and imperfect. But now, nearly a decade after the show ended, TV looks different. There are more stories, more voices, and Dunham is happy about that. She doesn't claim to represent all women. She never wanted to. But in the early 2010s, she was often positioned as the voice of a generation of millennial women. That label was as heavy as it was inaccurate. I always felt uncomfortable being asked to speak for a whole group of people, Dunham reflected. And looking back, it's easy to see why. The women of Girls were far from role models. They were often self-destructive. They were privileged. And they lived in a version of New York that didn't reflect the city's true diversity. Yet they were also honest, raw, and vulnerable. And that honesty struck a chord with many. Girls wasn't for everyone, and it wasn't supposed to be. But at the time, it felt like the only thing on TV capturing a certain millennial aimlessness. A certain post-college dread. A feeling of being lost while pretending to have it all figured out. Today, Dunham is in a different place. She's still writing, still creating. But she's no longer carrying the pressure to be the spokesperson for a generation. She's letting her work speak for itself. And she's welcoming other voices to the table. The conversation about representation in media has evolved. Audiences now expect, and demand, a broader range of stories. And that's something Dunham supports. In many ways, the critique of Girls helped open doors for other creators. It forced conversations about whose stories get told, and by whom. It made space for more inclusive shows to emerge. So while Girls may not have reflected all girls, it played a role in shifting the narrative. Lena Dunham is aware of that legacy, both the good and the complicated. She's at peace with it. And she's still creating, still pushing boundaries, in her own way. The industry has changed. Television has changed. And Lena Dunham has changed, too. She's no longer trying to be the voice of anyone but herself. And that's exactly how it should be.